If you hit your 40s and 50s and notice that fat seems to magically relocate to your belly, your hips, your thighs, even if your exercise and eating habits haven't changed, that's real. That's not just you imagining it. And the culprit isn't just age or willpower, it's the hormonal shift that happens when your estrogen levels drop during perimenopause and menopause. But before you panic, there is good news, and that is that the change is manageable and it's not the metabolic death sentence that diet culture or maybe even your parents and grandparents made it out to be. So let's break down what's really happening with estrogen, fat storage, and your metabolism after 40 and what you can do to reset your body for long-term fat loss and strength. So first and foremost, it's important to understand what estrogen's real job is. It's not just a hormone for reproduction. So most people just think about estrogen only in terms of periods, pregnancy, or menopause symptoms, but estrogen plays a major role in how and where your body stores fat, how efficiently you burn energy, and even how you build or lose muscle. So, in your 20s and 30s, estrogen helps your body to have more of a pear shape, or at least is the intent for women, where you're storing fat mainly in the hips and thighs, the subcutaneous fat. That type of fat is relatively harmless and it's even protective in small amounts. Everyone has it, and we should. But when estrogen levels drop during perimenopause and menopause, that fat begins to shift. The fat storage begins to shift towards the belly and the internal organs. This is what's known as visceral fat. So that's the menopause belly that a lot of women begin to notice. Even if they aren't having a ton of major weight gain, they'll still notice kind of that menopause. So the research has shown and confirmed that it's not just our imagination, that lower estrogen does change where fat lands in your body, which leads to more central fat and lower muscle mass. So, especially if you're not strength training or eating enough protein. So, there's four main reasons of why fat storage changes after 40. And the biggest thing to understand is that experts, leaders of science and metabolism and body composition all agree on one thing, and that's that estrogen decline doesn't break your metabolism, but it does make fat loss more challenging if you don't adjust your strategy. So here's what happens when estrogen levels drops. Number one is that your muscle mass declines. Estrogen is an anabolic hormone, so it helps your muscles to recover and to grow. Once those levels drop, your body's ability to synthesize new muscle proteins starts to break down. This is called anabolic resistance. So it means that you have less muscle, which equals slower metabolism, which equals fewer calories burned even at rest. The second thing that happens is that fat redistributes to your midsection. So when estrogen falls, your body shifts from storing fat in your hips and thighs, where it prefers for women, to storing more in your abdomen. So, this means that even if your weight stays the same, your shape may start to change. Your waistline may widen a little bit, and body fat becomes more visible through the midsection. So, this is because of the fact that as you're shifting from childbearing age, where your body wants to store the fat in those preferred places, you are moving out of that stage. So, things start to change a little bit. The third thing that happens is that your RMR, your resting metabolic rate, dips. So studies show that resting metabolism can drop about 100 to 200 calories per day in the 5 years following menopause. So it's not catastrophic, but it does add up if you don't adjust your intake or activity. So walking, household movement, fidgeting, daily steps, NEAT. I talked about this a little bit more in the episode about NEAT, but those things will contribute to the slowdown if you don't offset them by adding those elements in. So the fourth thing that happens is that your insulin sensitivity decreases. So, estrogen helps regulate your blood sugar and your fat metabolism. So, when levels drop, your cells become less responsive to insulin. So, this makes it easier to store fat, especially in the belly. This is why a lot of women start feeling like they have some issues with carbs and the way that their body is processing carbs after the age of 40. So, knowing these things, it helps you to understand why quick fixes tend to backfire after 40. Because when fat loss feels harder, it's tempting to turn to extreme diets or to hormone balancing supplements or workouts. But research actually shows that the quick fixes actually accelerate muscle loss. So the exact thing that's making fat loss harder in the first place is muscle loss, and turning to those quick fixes only makes it worse. So every crash diet makes it easier to lose muscle and harder to keep fat off. So this is why so many women over 40 tend to find themselves stuck in that yo-yo trap of getting smaller, softer, and more frustrated after every single diet cycle, because the fix isn't more restriction, it's more restoration of the things that are missing, of that muscle, of that lowered NEAT and movement where the calorie levels have dropped. So how do you work with your hormones instead of against them? So again, when we look to the science of what works best for women over 40 who want to have sustainable fat loss, they want to have faster metabolism, they want to have more energy, number one is to lift consistently. So resistance training is the single most powerful tool to combat that muscle loss, to boost your metabolism, and to reshape your body after 40. So even women in their 60s and 70s can build muscle when they lift progressively and eat enough protein. There's no expiration date on muscle growth. The stimulus for muscle growth doesn't discriminate based on age. So it's just about if you're willing to bring that stimulus into your regimen. So the second thing that you can do to work with your hormones rather than against them is to make sure you're eating enough protein at every meal, because again, your body is starting to change the way that it's processing certain things, and increased protein is actually needed as you age. So protein helps you to maintain your muscle while in a calorie deficit, and it helps you to feel full for longer. So this is where you want to have the recommendation of aiming for 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight, which ends up being like 150 for most women, depending on how much you weigh. But if you're thinking more of like a gram per pound of body weight, you should land in a decent range for most women. So you want to spread that across your meals and make sure that you're having a variety of protein sources, not just leaning towards one or the other. Now, the third thing is to stop living in cut mode. So always dieting. If you've been dieting for years, your metabolism probably needs a reset. It needs some downtime. You need a diet break, spending some time at maintenance level calories, fueling your body instead of restricting it, and bringing some of that hormonal balance back in before you go into another fat loss phase. Number four is to solve that NEAT part of the equation, the non-exercise activity. And so that means to move more, and move more all day long, and not just have an increased workout time. So this isn't just about going longer and harder in the gym. This is about daily activity, those steps, stretching, chores, having walking meetings or walking desks. All of those things add up to 100 or more calories being burned per day, which, as we talked about, is that dip that a lot of women are seeing as their resting metabolic rate is dropping. So the less that you move, the less that you can eat without gaining weight. So you just want to think about it that way. It's as simple as that. So this isn't just, again, it's not just about adding in cardio or longer workouts. It's about spreading it out all throughout the day, just like your protein. So the fifth thing that you can do to work with your metabolism rather than against it is to protect your recovery. I know I talk about recovery a lot, but I feel like it's one of those things that gets glazed over, or that this is where people tend to like skip and think that the video is over. But for women over 40, sleep, stress, recovery, those are your hidden fat loss variables that you may be skipping, or you may have gotten into the habit of skipping when you were younger. And cortisol, your stress hormone, can truly stall your fat loss. And that's one of the biggest increases of the belly fat. So if you're seeing a lot of belly fat, or you're chronically tired or overtraining, then that is a sign that your cortisol levels are heightened. And this is also why we don't want to, when we're trying to make up for the lowered resting metabolic rate and for the lower amount of calories, and when we're trying to increase our activity, this is why we don't want that increase in activity to only come from workouts, because workouts actually increase cortisol levels. So that's why we need more movement outside of the gym. But it's why we also need to make sure that we are taking our time in the gym, that we are doing workouts that allow for rest in between sets, not just supersets, not just circuits, that we are taking rest days in between our workouts, especially in between working the same body part or doing intense workouts, that we're aiming for that 7 to 9 hours of sleep, which is extremely hard, as those of us who have been through the perimenopausal, menopausal years, especially perimenopausal ladies. I'm sure that you've already started noticing that your sleep is being disturbed, and that is playing into this hormonal soup that you are dealing with. So aiming for that 7 to 9 hours of sleep. This is when, yes, if you need to start bringing in some supplementation to help that, having some melatonin to help you get to sleep, some magnesium to help you stay asleep, having your stress reducing protocols, your deep breathing, your journaling, your yoga, your short walks, your meditation, whatever it is for you to start having some stress reducing protocols in your life so that when you lay down to sleep, you can actually get to sleep, but also making sure that your diet and supplementation supports staying asleep at night. So, in the end, yes, you might want to consider HRT. It's not necessarily something that you want to rely on, but hormone replacement therapy can reduce a lot of the menopausal symptoms. So, and it can prevent some of that abdominal fat gain. So, it's not necessarily a magic bullet, but I find that it works really well when it's paired with strength training, good nutrition, and just overall lifestyle improvements, because HRT not only can make it easier to preserve muscle and control some of the fat distribution, but it doesn't override the basics. So when I have clients that come in and maybe they're already on HRT, but they're not doing certain protocols, they're not eating enough protein, they're not lifting, they're not doing those things, then when they add those in, that becomes the magic bullet. Likewise, if I have someone who is maybe they're following all the protocols, they're like, I'm doing all the things, like I'm lifting heavy, progressive overload, I'm eating my protein, like they've got all of their basics covered. And maybe their DEXA scans show that they're having a little bit harder time adding in muscle, then when HRT is added, we can usually see protocols similar to, or honestly better than some of the ladies in their 20s and 30s. So the truth, the reality, the thing that I hope you walk away empowered from this understanding is that there is, like, you're not broken. Your muscles, your metabolism, it's all adaptive. And if you are willing to change things up and shift and move as you get older, instead of just kind of put yourself on the sidelines and be upset that things aren't the way that they used to be, then you'll realize that, A, your body isn't fighting you, it's actually protecting you, and that estrogen decline doesn't destroy your metabolism. It just changes the rules of the game. And once you understand what those rules are, rules that you probably should have been playing the whole time, then you can actually build muscle. You can still eat enough, you can recover well, you can stop over dieting, and you can actually start seeing results again. And like I said, sometimes those results are even better than before. So this is why I've been talking so much about metabolism lately. For those of you guys who have been following the Metabolism Makeover series, where I am teaching women over 40 how to rebuild their muscle, how to reset their metabolism, and heal their hormones naturally and get supplementation when needed so that you can finally lose fat without endless restriction, without just chasing the next diet or doing more, working harder, and still not seeing results. So if you are ready to stop fighting your body and start working with it, then I highly suggest that you start adding some of these protocols in that we talked about before. I also have a 30-day reset calendar for free that you can grab below that kind of gives you some like slow little stair steps of how to start incorporating some of these elements into your diet. And it just gives you one simple, like science-backed step every day to begin restoring your metabolism, balancing your hormones, like reclaiming that confidence that you are on the right path. Because menopause doesn't mark the end of your metabolism, it's just an invitation to rebuild it. So I hope that helped you, and I will see you in the next one.